I'm Emily, a dedicated analyst at a large technology company in the United States. My work has always been my passion, and I pride myself on delivering excellent results. However, in recent months, something strange started to happen. My presentations, which had always been impeccable, began to show inconsistencies. Graphs were wrong, important data disappeared and, at times, ideas seemed disjointed. At first, I thought it was an oversight on my part, a momentary distraction. But as the errors piled up, I began to suspect there was something more behind it. So I decided to investigate discreetly. I began reviewing my old presentations, comparing them to the final versions I had presented. That's when I noticed a pattern. The errors were not random, they seemed carefully inserted to undermine the credibility of my proposals. My suspicion turned to my coworker, Jackson. He was always ambitious, but I never imagined he would resort to something so dishonest to advance in the company. One day, I decided to indirectly confront Jackson. We were in the break room, and I casually mentioned the problems I was having. "Jackson, have you noticed anything strange about your performances lately?" I asked as I grabbed a coffee. He looked up from his cell phone and looked at me with a rehearsed expression of surprise. "No, Emily. Everything seems normal to me." "Why do you ask?" It's just that I've been facing some problems with disappearing data and wrong graphics." "Maybe it's a bug in the system," I replied, trying to keep my voice casual. Jackson shrugged and went back to focusing on his cell phone. Maybe you should talk to IT." This evasive answer only increased my suspicions. I decided I needed concrete evidence before taking any action. For a few weeks, I started monitoring my files closely and implemented some security measures to track possible changes. It was then that I found what I was looking for. Jackson was accessing my files and making changes without my knowledge. With the evidence in hand, I knew I needed a plan to expose Jackson without damaging my own reputation. Confronting him directly could result in a situation where he denies everything and makes me seem paranoid. I needed allies, people who could confirm my findings and support my accusation. It was then that I remembered Clara, an employee in the IT department who had also been a victim of Jackson's manipulations. I went to Clara's office during a break and found her focused on her computer. "Clara, can I talk to you for a minute?" I asked, closing the door behind me. She looked at me curiously and nodded. "Of course, Emily. What happened?" I quickly explained what I had discovered about Jackson and showed the evidence I had collected. Clara was silent for a moment, absorbing the information. "I knew something was wrong, but I never imagined it was him," she said finally. "He also sabotaged some of my projects, but I was never able to prove it." "We need to tread carefully," I said. "If we are hasty, he could turn the tables on us. But with your help, we can gather enough evidence to unmask him once and for all." Clara looked hesitant but determined. "I'm in. Let's end his career the right way." From that moment on, Clara and I formed an alliance. We used our skills and resources to scour archives and digital records, seeking irrefutable evidence of Jackson's treasonous actions. Clara, with her IT expertise, managed to recover deleted emails and documents that incriminated our colleague. Each discovery brought us closer to the truth, but also increased the tension. We knew we were dealing with someone cunning and unscrupulous. The journey was just beginning, but I was determined to see justice done. When I realized that my presentations were being sabotaged, I knew I needed to take action. Finding out that Jackson, my coworker, was responsible was a shock. But instead of confronting him directly, I decided to be strategic. He needed allies and concrete evidence to unmask his treacherous actions. It was then that I remembered Clara. She worked in the IT department and, like me, had been a victim of Jackson's manipulations. Clara was a reserved person, often underestimated by her colleagues. I knew that if I could get your help, we would have a real chance of resolving this situation. Getting closer to Clara was a challenge. I knew she didn't trust people easily, especially after everything she had been through. One day, during a coffee break, I decided to approach her. "Clara, can I talk to you for a moment?" I asked, trying not to sound desperate. She looked at me suspiciously, but nodded. "Of course, Emily. What do you need?" I took a deep breath and got straight to the point. "I know Jackson has been interfering with my work. I have some evidence, but I need help collecting more. Would you be willing to help me unmask him?" Clara hesitated, her eyes showing a mixture of surprise and curiosity. "Why me? What makes you think I can help?" "Because I know what he did to you. I know you were hurt by him too. And honestly, I think together we can fix this." She was silent for a moment, analyzing my words. Finally, he nodded. "Show me what you got." I took Clara to my office and showed her the evidence I had gathered so far: altered emails, corrupted documents, among other things. She studied everything closely, her face serious. "This is serious, Emily. If we're going to do this, we need to make sure we have irrefutable proof. Are you willing to take that risk?" she asked, her voice full of determination. I nodded. "I am. We can't let him continue to harm others." With that, Clara and I began our investigation. She used her technical skills to access and recover deleted emails and documents that incriminated Jackson. We spent hours combing through files and digital records, getting closer and closer to definitive proof. During our investigations, I began to admire Clara even more. Her technical ability was impressive, and her determination to seek justice only increased my respect for her. One night, while we were working late, we had a conversation that left a deep impression on me. "Clara, why did you decide to help me?" I asked, curious. She stopped what she was doing and looked at me. "Because I know what it's like to be underestimated and marginalized. I've been like this my whole life. And honestly, I'm tired. We can't allow people like Jackson to go unpunished." His words touched me deeply. I felt that we had created a strong bond, based on our common quest for justice and righteousness. Finally, we find irrefutable evidence of Jackson's sabotage. The tension increased every day, but our resolve did not weaken. We were ready to expose him and restore justice to the company. "We're almost there, Emily. A little more and we'll have everything we need," Clara said, with a confident smile. I nodded, feeling the same confidence. I knew that, together, we could overcome any obstacle. And, most importantly, I knew we were doing the right thing. The truth would prevail, and Jackson would finally face the consequences of his actions. When I started digging through files and digital records alongside Clara, I felt we were entering dangerous but necessary territory. The smell of fresh coffee permeated the small IT department room where we sat, giving us a bit of comfort amid the growing tension. Clara, with her technical skill and unwavering dedication, was the perfect partner for this mission. "Emily, are you sure you want to go through with this?" Clara asked, her eyes fixed on the computer screen as she typed quick commands. "Yes, Clara. We need to expose what Jackson is doing. It's not just for me, it's for everyone he hurt," I replied, trying to hide my anxiety. While Clara browsed the company's servers, I focused on gathering any emails or documents that could serve as evidence against Jackson. It was hours of hard work, with Clara recovering deleted files and tracking suspicious activity. "Look at this," Clara said suddenly, a gleam of excitement in her eyes. "I found an email that he tried to delete. It's a conversation between Jackson and another colleague, where he clearly admits to sabotaging his presentations." My heart accelerated. "That's great. But we need more. We need something irrefutable." Clara nodded, returning to work. The tension was palpable, but there was also a sense of hope. We were getting closer and closer to justice. The hours passed slowly, and the room seemed to get smaller and smaller as the pressure increased. "Emily, there's one more thing," Clara caught my attention again. "I found an activity log that shows that Jackson has accessed your computer without permission several times over the past few weeks." "That's perfect. Combined with the emails, we have solid proof," I said, feeling momentary relief. Over the next few days, Clara and I continued to collect and organize all the evidence. Each new discovery increased our confidence, but also caution. We knew that one false step could ruin everything. One particularly long night, as we were going through the files one last time, Clara turned to me. "Emily, do you ever wonder why Jackson does this? I mean, other than the obvious ambition," she asked, her voice low and contemplative. "Yes, I've thought about that. And that's what makes me more determined to stop him. People like Jackson can't keep abusing others to get ahead," I replied, my voice firm. However, Clara's question made me reflect more deeply. Did Jackson have some personal reason or trauma that led him to act like this? But at that moment, the priority was justice. Finally, with all the evidence in hand, Clara and I prepared to present our case to Mr. Roberts. The nervousness was undeniable, but the confidence in our investigation sustained us. On the morning of the meeting, Clara gave me one last piece of advice. "Emily, remember, stay calm and be clear with the information. We have everything we need to unmask Jackson," she said, squeezing my shoulder in a gesture of support. "Thank you, Clara. I couldn't have done this without you," I replied gratefully. When Mr. Roberts entered the conference room, I felt a chill run down my spine. But when the presentation began, each word flowed with the certainty that we were doing the right thing. With each piece of evidence we presented, I saw the expression of disbelief and, eventually, fury on Mr. Roberts' face. "This is unacceptable," he said finally, his voice thick with disappointment and anger. "Jackson will be held accountable for his actions immediately." As I left the room, I felt a huge weight lifted from my shoulders. Clara and I exchanged a look of silent satisfaction. We knew the battle was far from over, but we had taken a crucial step. "Now just wait for the next meeting," Clara said, with a relieved smile. "Yes, but at least now we know the truth is on our side," I replied, feeling a new wave of determination. And so, Clara and I prepare for the next chapter of this journey, aware that justice, even if it takes time, always finds its way. During my investigations, I began to gain the trust of Mr. Roberts, my boss. He was always a fair man, but quite demanding, which made any recognition from him extremely valuable. At first, I was wary of sharing my ideas, especially knowing that Jackson was always lurking, ready to invalidate anything I presented. However, I decided that the best way to expose Jackson was to prove myself beyond question. On a particularly tense afternoon, after a series of stressful meetings, I went to Mr. Roberts' office. I knocked on the door and, when I was invited in, I noticed her tired but attentive look. "Mr. Roberts, I would like to share some ideas that can improve our data analysis processes," I said, trying to hide my nervousness. He looked at me over his glasses, measuring my words. "Of course, Emily. You can continue." I then presented a new data crossing method that could optimize our analyses by at least 30%. I explained each step of the process in detail, presenting graphs and simulations that I prepared myself. As I spoke, I noticed that Mr. Roberts was becoming more and more interested. "That's really impressive, Emily. Why haven't we seen this before?" he asked, intrigued. I knew that this was the cue to subtly highlight Jackson's sabotage. "Well, sir, some of these ideas have been presented before, but for some reason, they never made it to your desk," I replied, trying to remain calm. Mr. Roberts frowned, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. He paused thoughtfully before responding. "I will investigate this further. But I must say, your ideas are exceptional. I want you to present them at the next team meeting." I left the room feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. He knew that by gaining Mr. Roberts' trust, he was one step closer to exposing Jackson. In the days that followed, I continued to come up with innovative solutions, all of which were well received by Mr. Roberts. He started delegating more responsibilities to me, which didn't go unnoticed by Jackson. One afternoon, while adjusting the last details of a presentation, Jackson approached. "Emily, I hear your ideas are popular." "Congratulations," he said, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Thank you, Jackson. I'm just trying to do my best for the team," I replied, keeping my composure. Jackson was silent for a moment, as if pondering something. "I hope you know what you're doing. Sometimes things aren't as simple as they seem," he said, before leaving. Jackson's veiled threat only strengthened my resolve. I continued to work hard, always under the guidance of Mr. Roberts. In one of the meetings, he even commented to the team about the importance of my contributions. "I want to highlight the excellent work that Emily has done. Your ideas have been fundamental to our recent advances," he declared, looking directly at me. I felt a warmth in my chest, a mixture of pride and gratitude. I knew I was on the right path. Increasingly, Mr. Roberts trusted me to lead important projects, and little by little, Jackson's influence began to wane. Behind the scenes, Clara and I continued to dig through the archives and digital records. Every day, we gathered more evidence of Jackson's sabotage. Mr. Roberts' trust in me was essential for me to be able to expose the truth without it seeming like personal retaliation. Finally, with the evidence in hand and Mr. Roberts' support, I was ready to take the next step. The tension was palpable, but I knew it was time to act. I was about to expose Jackson, not just to clear my name, but to ensure justice was served. When I began digging through archives and digital records with Clara, we discovered something I hadn't expected: personal details about Jackson's life that revealed a vulnerable, human side to him. We found emails and messages that showed that he was going through a difficult financial situation, with accumulated debts and immense pressure to support his family. To make matters worse, there were signs that his father was ill and needed expensive medical care. I sat at my desk, my heart heavy with this new discovery. Clara, noticing my uneasiness, asked, "Emily, are you okay?" She approached, worried. "I don't know, Clara," I replied, sighing deeply. I knew we were dealing with a saboteur, but I didn't imagine Jackson was going through all this. Clara frowned, crossing her arms. "What do you mean?" "Look at these emails." I pointed to the screen. "He's deep in debt, his father is sick. He's desperate." Clara looked at the emails, and for a moment, her hard face softened. "That doesn't justify what he did, Emily," she said, but with less conviction than usual. "I agree," I replied. "But it makes me question whether we are being fair. Whether our methods are ethical. We are about to ruin someone's life that is already in pieces." Clara sighed, sitting in the next chair. "Emily, I understand your compassion. But think about everything he did to harm you and other people. He didn't think twice before sabotaging your presentations and preventing you from growing in the company. He needs to be held accountable for his actions." "I know," I replied, pursing my lips. "But I can't stop thinking about what this will do to him and his family." The following days were a whirlwind of emotions for me. Every time I looked at Jackson at the company, I saw not only the treacherous colleague, but also a desperate man, desperately trying to keep his head above water. I began to have difficulty sleeping. My nights were filled with conflicting thoughts about justice and compassion. One particularly difficult morning, I decided to look for Clara again. I needed to vent, seek some guidance. "Clara, I need to talk," he said, finding her in the coffee room. She looked at me, already knowing what it was about. "Emily, we cannot let compassion blind us to justice. Imagine if he keeps doing this to other people. He needs to be stopped." "What if," I began, hesitantly. "What if we tried to help him in some way? Expose him but also offer a chance at redemption? Maybe talk to Mr. Roberts, explain the situation and try to find a solution that won't completely destroy his life." Clara was silent for a moment, pondering. "It's a possibility, Emily. But we need to make sure this is not seen as weakness or collusion. Mr. Roberts needs to understand the impact of Jackson's actions while at the same time recognizing his personal situation. Let's think of a plan then," he said, feeling a ray of hope. "Maybe we can find a way to bring justice without completely destroying someone." Clara nodded, a slight smile forming on her lips. "Let's do what's right, Emily. Together." From that moment on, our focus changed slightly. We continued to collect evidence against Jackson, but we also began to think of ways to present the situation in a way that could lead to a more fair and humane resolution. The internal struggle between justice and compassion continued, but I knew that, in the end, we would find a path that balanced both values. When Clara reminded me of the importance of justice and righteousness, I was in a moment of internal conflict. I had discovered personal details about Jackson that revealed a more human and vulnerable side to him, and it made me question whether I was being fair in my quest for justice. However, Clara, with her calm and firm voice, brought me back to reality. "Emily, I understand what you're feeling," she began, looking into my eyes with a serious expression. "But think about all the people he's harmed. And it's not just about the two of us. Jackson has been doing this for a long time, and if he continues to get away with it, how many other careers will he destroy?" I sighed, feeling the weight of the situation. Clara was right. The search for truth and justice needed to prevail, regardless of the personal feelings I was beginning to develop. "I know, Clara. It's just difficult not to feel a little guilty. I don't want to be seen as someone who is vindictive," I confessed. "It's not revenge, Emily. It's justice. He needs to be held accountable for his actions. And remember, you're not alone in this. I was wronged by him too. We both deserve justice." Clara then shared a little more of her own story, detailing how she had been underestimated and marginalized at the company for years. She was a brilliant employee in the IT department, but was always seen as a reserved person with no great ambitions. Jackson had taken advantage of this perception to manipulate and sabotage his work as well. "I went unnoticed for years, Emily. I was always told I didn't have what it took to move up in the company. Jackson made sure to reinforce that, sabotaging my initiatives and making sure I looked incompetent. When you came to me with the evidence against him, I saw a chance not only to get revenge, but to finally be recognized for my work." The determination in Clara's voice was inspiring. She was right. It was a question of justice, not revenge. We needed to expose Jackson so he could no longer harm anyone. We decided to intensify our efforts. Clara used her technical skills to search digital files and records. We spent sleepless nights analyzing emails, deleted documents, and activity logs. The tension was palpable, but the adrenaline of being so close to the truth kept us focused. "Emily, I think I found something," Clara said one night, her eyes shining with excitement. "This email that Jackson deleted proves that he manipulated the data from your last presentation. He sent specific instructions to change the information before you presented it." I looked at the computer screen, my heart beating faster. It was the proof we needed. Clara had unearthed what appeared to be the final piece of the puzzle. "This is perfect, Clara. With this, we can finally expose Jackson," he said, feeling a mixture of relief and determination. "Yes, and we have to do it the right way," Clara added. "We will present everything clearly and forcefully. There will be no way for him to escape." Over the next few days, we worked meticulously to organize all the evidence into a complete dossier. Clara and I went over every detail, making sure nothing was left out. The tension was rising, but we were determined to see this through to the end. "Emily, are we ready?" Clara asked on the morning of the decisive meeting. I took a deep breath, feeling a wave of nervousness mixed with determination. "Yes, Clara. We are ready. Let's get justice." With the evidence in hand and determination in our hearts, we were prepared to face Jackson and expose his treasonous actions. The search for truth brought us together and strengthened us, and we were ready to fight for what was right. With the evidence in hand, I knew the time to act had arrived. I devised a meticulous plan to expose Jackson during the staff meeting that would take place on Friday. The tension was palpable as the day approached. I felt a mix of nervousness and determination, aware that this decision could not only reveal the truth, but also have serious repercussions for both Jackson and myself. On the morning of the meeting, Clara and I met early in the office. She was visibly nervous, but also determined to see justice done. "Emily, are you sure you want to do this?" she asked, as she adjusted her glasses and checked the files one last time. Yes, Clara. We've come this far. We can't turn back now, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. We have to do this, not just for ourselves, but for everyone he harmed. We entered the meeting room, where the entire team was already gathered, including Mr. Roberts. Jackson was sitting in the corner, with his usual confident smile. I sat at the front, connected my laptop to the projector, and took a deep breath. Good morning, team, I began, trying to remain calm. Today, before we start with the topics on our agenda, I would like to present something that I consider to be extremely important. Jackson looked at me with a raised eyebrow, clearly surprised. I continued, clicking to open the documents Clara and I had collected. Over the past few weeks, I have noticed some inconsistencies in my presentations and proposals. Upon investigation, I discovered that these inconsistencies were not mere errors, but rather deliberate sabotage. The murmur began to spread throughout the room. I kept my gaze steady on Mr. Roberts, who seemed surprised but curious. I have irrefutable evidence here that these sabotages were carried out by a member of our team. Jackson began to shift in his seat, visibly uncomfortable. I knew he was starting to realize what was coming. I continued, displaying emails and documents that Clara had recovered. This is the evidence we have collected. And the person responsible for these actions is Jackson. The room was completely silent. Jackson tried to get up, but I stopped him. Please, Jackson, sit down. You will have the opportunity to defend yourself. Mr. Roberts looked at me seriously. Emily, this is a very serious accusation. Are you sure of your evidence? Yes, Mr. Roberts. Clara and I checked everything thoroughly. All documents and emails point to Jackson. Clara nodded, confirming my words. Jackson, helpless, began to stutter. This is absurd. Emily, you're trying to frame me. Jackson, the evidence speaks for itself. Every email, every change to my documents, it all leads back to you, I replied, remaining calm. Mr. Roberts stood up and looked directly at Jackson. Jackson, these are very serious allegations. We will need to investigate this further, but for now, you are suspended from all company duties. Jackson went pale, looking around the room as if for support, but only met with disapproving looks. This cannot be happening. It's happening, Jackson, Clara said, finally speaking up. And it's time for you to face the consequences of your actions. The meeting ended with a feeling of shock and relief. Mr. Roberts thanked me for my courage and promised a full investigation. As Clara and I left the room, she gave me a shy smile. You did the right thing, Emily. I know, Clara. And I couldn't have done it without you, I replied, feeling a huge weight lift off my shoulders. We knew the repercussions were yet to come, but at that moment, the truth had finally prevailed. At the meeting, my heart was beating so loudly that I could hear it in my ears. I was about to expose Jackson, and the tension in the room was palpable. Every eye was fixed on me, waiting for my introduction. I knew there was no room for error, every word needed to be precise and every proof irrefutable. Good morning, team, I began, trying to keep my voice steady. Today, I have something important to share with all of you. Over the past few months, I have noticed some inconsistencies in my presentations and proposals. Initially, I thought they were my mistakes, but after thorough investigation, I discovered something more serious. Everyone in the room became visibly more attentive. Jackson, sitting in the back, maintained a neutral expression, but his eyes betrayed a slight concern. With the help of Clara from the IT department, I continued, gesturing to Clara, who was sitting next to me. I was able to gather evidence that these inconsistencies were not accidental. They were, in fact, the result of deliberate sabotage. A wave of murmurs ran through the room. Mr. Roberts, our boss, frowned and leaned forward in his chair. Emily, are you sure what you're saying? These are serious accusations. Yes, Mr. Roberts, I'm absolutely sure, I replied, as Clara connected her laptop to the projector. I will show you the emails and documents that prove Jackson purposely altered my performances and deleted files to harm me. Evidence began to appear on the screen: deleted emails, edited documents, and activity records in the system. Clara explained technically how she had recovered this data, making it clear that there was no room for doubt. Jackson, who had been silent until then, stood up abruptly. "That's absurd. I would never do that. Emily, you're defaming me." I remained calm. "Jackson, I know this is hard to hear, but the facts are here. And it wasn't just me you harmed. Clara was also a victim of your manipulations. We have records of your activities in the system, everything is documented." Mr. Roberts looked at Jackson with a hard expression. "Jackson, this evidence is overwhelming. What do you have to say in your defense?" Jackson hesitated, clearly shaken. I was under a lot of pressure. I just wanted a chance to stand out. I didn't think it was that serious." "You didn't think it was that serious?" Clara interrupted, her voice filled with restrained indignation. "You harmed our careers, our work. This is very serious." Mr. Roberts took a deep breath, visibly disappointed. "Jackson, your actions are unacceptable. We will need to take drastic action. Integrity and trust are pillars of this company, and you have violated both." Jackson hung his head, defeated. "I understand. Emily, Clara," continued Mr. Roberts, "I want to congratulate you for having the courage to bring this to light. Emily, your dedication and integrity are exemplary. Clara, your technical skills were essential in exposing this situation. Let's discuss how we can pay it forward them properly." After the meeting, I felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. Clara and I exchanged a complicit look. "We did it," she said, smiling. "Yes, we did it," I replied, feeling a rush of gratitude for having Clara by my side. As we left the room, Mr. Roberts called us back. "Emily, Clara, I'd like to talk to you about an opportunity. The company needs leaders like you, and I think I've found the perfect place for your skills." I looked at Clara, and she gave me an encouraging smile. We knew that, despite everything, truth and integrity had prevailed, and we were ready to face whatever challenge came next. When the truth came out and Jackson was finally unmasked, the atmosphere in the company changed completely. The revelation of his manipulations not only uncovered the saboteur, but also put me in a prominent position. Mr. Roberts, who was watching the entire scene with attentive eyes and a serious expression, approached me after the meeting. "Emily, can I talk to you in my office?" he asked, and I nodded, feeling a mixture of nervousness and relief. When we entered the office, he closed the door and invited me to sit down. "Firstly, I want to congratulate you for the courage and integrity you demonstrated today. Not everyone would have the audacity to expose the truth in this way." "Thank you, Mr. Roberts. It was a difficult situation, but I knew I needed to do what was right," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. He sat back in his chair, pondering for a moment before continuing. "I have been watching your work and your presentations. You have shown an incredible capacity for innovation and leadership, something this company deeply values. Your courage in bringing this issue to light only reinforces how valuable you are to us." I was surprised and flattered by his words. "I just wanted to make sure the work was treated fairly, both for myself and my colleagues. This is exactly what we need in leadership positions," he said, with a small smile. "That's why I'm offering you a promotion. Starting today, you will be the new manager of the analytics department. With that will come greater responsibilities, but also greater opportunities for you to grow and contribute to the future of the company." My heart leapt with joy and pride. "I really appreciate your trust, Mr. Roberts. I promise I won't let you down." "I'm sure of it," he replied, extending his hand for a firm shake. I left his office with mixed emotions, and the first person who wanted to share the news was Clara. I found her in the IT room, still focused on the computer. When she saw me, she smiled. "How is it?" she asked, curious. "Well, let's say I'm now the new manager of the analytics department," I announced, smiling broadly. Clara's eyes widened. "Really? That's amazing, Emily. Congratulations." "I appreciate it," Clara. But this wouldn't have been possible without your help. You were crucial to us unmasking Jackson. She shook her head meekly. I just did what was right. And by the way, Mr. Roberts also offered me a promotion. I'm going to lead a new cybersecurity project. That's fantastic, Clara. You deserve it, I exclaimed, hugging her. We celebrated our achievements that day, and I felt immense gratitude for having found such a loyal and competent ally. Later, as we sipped celebratory coffee, Clara mused aloud, you know, Emily, this all just goes to show that truth and integrity always prevail. I'm proud of us. Me too, Clara. And this is just the beginning. We have a long way to go, and I'm excited to see what the future holds. That moment not only marked a personal and professional victory for both of us, but it also reinforced the importance of fighting for what is fair. In the end, the truth always finds a way to prevail, and our integrity has guided us to a promising future. Finally, the long-awaited day arrived. Clara and I were at the height of our euphoria after Jackson's exposure. The feeling of justice being done was indescribable. Clara, always so reserved and underestimated, was now seen as the brilliant technical mind she always was. And me, well, I was finally being recognized for my integrity and competence. Everything seemed to be falling into place perfectly. However, as in any good story, one last, unexpected development was about to emerge. We were celebrating our achievements in the cafe around the corner from the office, discussing our future plans and the new responsibility that Mr. Roberts had entrusted to me. Clara was radiant when talking about the new project she would lead. Emily, can you believe this? Finally, they realize what I can do, she exclaimed, with a sparkle in her eyes. I smiled, satisfied with the victories we were reaping. You deserve every recognition, Clara. Without you, none of this would have been possible. We are quite a team, I replied, toasting my coffee. However, our celebration was interrupted by an urgent call from Mr. Roberts. Emily, I need you to come to my office immediately. Something very serious has happened, he said, in a voice that didn't hide concern. My heart raced. What could have happened? Clara and I exchanged a look of apprehension and hurriedly headed to the office. When we entered Mr. Roberts's office, the atmosphere was tense. Jackson was there, with a look that mixed despair and malice. Emily, Jackson has made a very serious accusation against you. He is alleging that you manipulated important data to harm the company, said Mr. Roberts, as he handed me a document with the supposed evidence. My world seemed to fall apart for a moment. How dare he try to frame me? However, before I could respond, Clara stepped forward. Mr. Roberts, I think it's time to show you something I've been saving for a situation like this, she said, with impressive calm. Clara revealed a series of records and logs that clearly showed that Jackson was trying to plant false evidence against me. Predicting that Jackson might try something like this, I began monitoring his activities closely after our last meeting. Here are the records that prove he is lying and trying to frame Emily, Clara explained, as she showed the documents to Mr. Roberts. Jackson's expression instantly changed. He was speechless, caught red-handed once again. Mr. Roberts analyzed the documents carefully and, after a few minutes of silence, spoke out. Jackson, your actions are unacceptable and go against every ethical principle of this company. You are terminated immediately and the company will take legal action against you, he stated firmly. The room was silent for a moment before Jackson was escorted out, demoralized and defeated. Mr. Roberts turned to me and Clara with a look of gratitude and admiration. Emily, I apologize for any doubt this situation may have caused. Your integrity is unquestionable and, due to your competence and courage, I would like to formalize the offer for you to lead the new department, he said, extending his hand. I accepted the handshake, feeling a wave of relief and satisfaction. Clara and I left the office feeling certain that truth and integrity had prevailed once again. We did it, Clara. We did it, he said, hugging her. She smiled, visibly moved. Yes, Emily. And this is just the beginning. Together, we can achieve even more, she replied, firmly. As we walked through the halls of the company, I felt like a new chapter was opening for both of us. Justice had been served, and now we were ready to face any challenge that lay ahead, stronger and more united than ever.